Mortal Kombat 1 is perhaps the most jaw-dropping fighting game I have ever had the privilege of playing, and not just in a figurative sense, because there is literally an X-ray attack in which Sub-Zero skewers his opponent's brain through their mouth with a shard of ice, rendered in a shocking amount of detail.
I'm fighting a fool!
Between the new cameo mechanic, an increased focus on aerial play, and some of the most stunning visuals I've ever seen in a fighting game, this is a game that feels truly next-gen from edge to edge. That's a polite way of saying I have no idea how they are going to get this running on the Switch. Let me get this out of the way. Despite my best efforts, Warner Brothers did not have the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 1 available for me to preview at Summer Games Fest. They wouldn't answer any of my questions about it, and the only version I got to touch was the PlayStation 5 version. I was actually debating whether I could even really write an accurate preview of this game, as there is a very high, if not altogether inevitable, likelihood that the Switch version will feel completely different to play than on other platforms. That isn't news, and for anyone who played the Switch version of Mortal Kombat 11 from a few years back, you probably already have a sense for how this is going to go. While that version of the game was competent, and even ran at a somewhat stable 60 frames per second at times, the visual downgrade was stark, and the always online requirement made accessing several key modes all but useless when on the go. The general consensus was that it worked, but was far from the ideal way to play for most. Mortal Kombat 1 ups the production value substantially compared to 11. Characters look almost photorealistic, and environments are dense with detail well beyond what I've ever seen in the genre before. The amount of gore and viscera that explodes from characters during a fatality is beyond impressive, and combat animations are buttery smooth in a way that feels like it should be impossible. The most shocking feature for me was that after picking a fighter and opponent from the character selection screen, the game seamlessly shifts them into the fight without a single visible loading screen. How much of this will be retained for the Switch version? Those were the questions I had at the end of my preview, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any answers. But for Switch players who are willing to tolerate the inevitable compromises, Mortal Kombat 1 is poised to be an incredible fighting game from a mechanical perspective. The biggest new addition to the game is cameo fighters, who can be called into battle to fight alongside you with a single button press. While not a new concept to the fighting genre as a whole, the execution in Mortal Kombat 1 feels remarkably open-ended and dynamic. You can stitch your cameo fighter into combos effortlessly, leverage them for aerial support after launching an enemy into the air, tag team with them for brutal finishers, and much more. And if you pick a primary fighter with a shorter typical attack range, you can supplement them with a long-range cameo fighter like Kano, whose eye lasers can deal devastating damage. It adds a whole new dimension to Mortal Kombat's tried and true hard-hitting combat, upping the pace of the game and introducing a new layer of strategy. I even saw my cameo fighter fight the AIs sometimes when we both called them in simultaneously. The four primary fighters I played as during my demo, Sub-Zero, Kitana, Liu Kang, and Kenshi, all felt nimble and responsive. While I'm not so experienced with the Mortal Kombat franchise that I could point out all the minute differences in how they played, especially with some limited time with the game, what I can tell you is that they all felt remarkably agile compared to my memories of playing Mortal Kombat X all those years ago, whether I was unleashing a flurry of attacks on the ground or launching my opponent up in the air so I could drag them back down. And if the table should turn and you find yourself overwhelmed, the return of combo breakers adds a quick way to give yourself an out at the exchange for a little bit of your power meter. Now, I'm no fighting game expert, but I felt like I was able to hold my own when I really leveraged this expanded tool set, which gives me hope that the onboarding process will be a little more forgiving than in other fighting games. If you're partially interested in Mortal Kombat 1 thanks to the series' typical over-the-top sense of twisted humor, you'll find a lot to love in Mortal Kombat 1. While I didn't get to test out any of the story-focused content, the voice acting is as dramatic as ever, and when combined with the subtle ways characters will taunt each other while idling or utilizing cameo fighters, results in an experience that balances the shock factor with the laughs in a satisfying balance. I'm really curious about the direction the rebooted story will take, as well as how faithfully the spirit of its presentation and the feel of its gameplay will transfer to the Switch's 720p screen. After all the anti-aliasing and textures have been dropped down, of course. We'll find out when Mortal Kombat 1 launches on Nintendo Switch September 19th, 2023. For more news, previews, and coverage from Summer Games Fest, stay tuned to Nintendo Everything.